all the divisions. So this is Senate appropriation. No, we have Senate appropriations, and we're taking up the legislature's budget, and we have Dan Dickerson here from Joint Fiscal Office, who's going to present the different appropriations that we have, including joint fiscal, legislative, so the Sergeant at Arms, the whole entire legislative budget. Okay, so thank you, Dan.
Yes, thank you for having me. For the record, Dan Dickerson from Joint Fiscal Office. I'm going to go through this memo that you should have in front of you. There is a packet on your committee web page that has all the numbers for each office. I'm not planning to go through those today, just given the short time we have, but they're there if you want to refer to them and then ask me questions, after this. I'm happy to answer them or have one of the department heads answer them as needed. But I'm going to focus on this memo that gives sort of the high level picture of what's going on with the branch. So for FY24, the legislative branch appropriation request is $20,659,643. This is about 1.1 million above what was appropriated in FY23, which is a growth rate of about 5.6%. And I highlight here that the three biggest drivers are really, I guess, what I would call, I don't know if the best term is non-discretionary, but sort of just increases to staffing costs, benefits, and those internal service costs that usually go up every year. And so you can see in this table, those three big drivers are basically the first two items here: the 629,000 for pay act and benefits changes, and then
internal service,
and then 120 for internal service. So 750,000 of our increase are those two items, and then the rest are what I call more of the discretionary or increases to base services or increases that help us provide better services to the General Assembly. So I will flip to the second page and just dive right into some of the details of those cost drivers. So on the compensation front, there are two pieces. The first, the biggest piece here is just incorporating the Pay Act that went into effect July of 2022. So all staff who are exempt employees received the 4.9%, and then starting this year for the first time, legislators now get that the 4.9, which is the step in COLA. Previously, legislators just got the COLA. And then the second smaller piece of this is back in spring of 2022, the Joint Legislative Management Committee approved a new staff compensation structure. And then our HR department, our HR office hired a compensation analyst to sort of slot employees into, or I guess propose where employees should be slotted in that new compensation structure, which resulted in compensation increases for many legislative staff. So that total cost was about $447,000. Most of that was built into the FY23 appropriation, but some of that was not. So in FY23, the part that was not funded, we're just paying for out of carry forward, but I am building in, or I have built in the remainder of that cost increase for FY24. On the benefits, this is pretty straightforward. For those individuals on the defined benefit and on the defined contribution, the state share rates went up, and then health premiums also increased in FY24. So those pieces are about a $230,000 increase from year to year. Internal service fund changes. I'm sure you've probably heard a lot of this from other offices, so I won't go into detail, but those have increased for us. So getting into personnel, this is where we get into, I guess, the more what I would call discretionary component of this. The first piece is the Joint Legislative Management Committee voted to authorize 2 new Capitol Police officers at its meeting on March 17th, 2023. We estimate at this time for those 2 positions to carry an annual cost of about $230,000, but that could vary up or down just based on who ends up being hired into those positions, whether experienced officers or new officers. But that was passed in the House budget, and I've incorporated that into this documentation. On the next page, page 3, legislative operations. In the past, Mike Front, who's the director, has brought in sort of a floating committee assistant. We've never actually funded it in the budget. We just sort of covered it out of carry forward. So we're now incorporating that into the budget. So it's something that's been practiced, but we haven't funded it. But we thought it made sense going forward, just because of COVID, and if somebody falls out for a day, then it's helpful to have somebody that can backfill. This next piece is not so much an increased cost as just well, I guess I'll explain it. JFO has had a limited service position, and we are swapping that over to human resources to just help as they continue to build up their operation. This is a limited service position that was funded in last year, so it was funded within the JFO budget for FY23. So it's not a new cost. We're just moving the position over. JFO is retaining some of that funding to cover the committee assistant. Actually, your committee assistant, and then the rest of that moves over to the HR department or HR office. And then, then the next piece I sort of already explained. And then personnel savings. So this is just from year to year, people change their health plans, or somebody leaves and we bring somebody else in, and they have a lower cost or a higher cost. For FY24, based on my budget, I'm anticipating that we are going to save about $192,000 on just various changes within existing offices, people coming and going and changing their benefit plans. I think last year I anticipated that being a bigger up, so it just sort of goes up and down year to year. Other budget pressures, for the most part, these are a little more minor, but I'll walk through them. First piece is legislator per diems. These are the meals rates, the mileage rates, and the lodging rates that are driven by what the federal government sets for a given year. So those have gone up just because of inflation. So I built that into the budget. Professional development, within each budget, I built in funding for additional professional development opportunities, tuition reimbursement, attendance of conferences. This new funding totals roughly $59,000.
Well, for legislative council, they have continuing legal education requirements. That would be an example of something that would be covered under the professional development.
Yes, exactly. We have funded on an ongoing basis their licensing, but yes, if they want to attain any other proficiencies, then this funding would allow that. IT operating costs, this is another one that's driven primarily by inflation. There is a little bit of uncertainty in this, but the IT folks have sort of given their best estimate on what those costs will be, based on contracts being due and so on and so forth. On the IT front, just something that I think is coming up, probably not in FY24, but possibly for FY25, is they're exploring a new data management system for the branch. So it could be, depending on whether we buy the software or whether we lease software. If we buy it, there's going to be the big one-time cost, and then maybe more minor ongoing. But if we lease, then it could be an ongoing cost. So that's something that I'll be exploring for next year's budget, but just something to be aware of that might come up. And then all of other pressures, mostly little things in each budget that are driven by inflation. It's a pretty minor increase. And then this table on page 4 shows the breakdown for each individual office. But I think I've gotten into the habit of trying to present one uniform budget for the branch, even though there are separate appropriations. And then finally, and this is something that was missed for the House budget, but there is an existing position within human resources. So currently, there are 2 onboarded individuals within human resources, and then there's the position that we gave them from JFO. One of those positions is permanent. That's the director, Arlene Donovan, and then the other 2 are limited service. We are proposing to make the existing onboard person a permanent position, permanent exempt position. And so the position's already funded. We have somebody on board. It's just a matter of changing it from the service to.
And there's no cost because we're picking up the same.
And that is the very quick overview of the legislative branch for FY24.
Questions?
Well, I'm just going to comment that after over 30 years in the legislature, the job has become incredibly complex being a legislator in this state. And while I sort of just ignore all the changes in this budget, I see nothing that's going to help our jobs become any better. Especially as committee chairs, and there's 4 of us in this room who are committee chairs. One is the pro temp. We get little assistance. We have staff assistance to the committees, but I have no assistance in even going through the hundreds of requests I get daily. I am going to suggest that at least we study what we can do to make the legislature a more equal branch. I'm not going to oppose anything that's in here. I think they're all good ideas, but there's nothing that's helping me as a legislator other than maybe a little protection. And I think it's a real crisis. And people are looking at the salaries, and I could care less about that at this point in my life. But I do care about what happens in the future. To being a chair of a committee or being a member of that committee, particularly in the Senate where you got 2 committees, you got all kinds of things going on.
Your constituent base.
I open up my email and I have literally 200 emails. I can't possibly respond to that. And I have to dig through those emails to find ones that are actually critical. So I find myself, and I think we're all shaking our heads. And unless we actually make this job a little more equal to the judicial and the executive branch, you can't ask us to oversee the executive branch.
So I just want to agree with you, and I think in particular, as you start talking about committee chairs, for me, you have Peggy pretty much year round.
Yeah.
I have an assistant January to May, period. And there's significant amount of work that goes on the rest of the time that becomes.
I don't actually have Peggy year round.
Oh, we only have it because of justice oversight.
Justice
Yeah.
oversight.
So it is dumbfounding how to do what you're suggesting. Well, I do have a question, and I know that in the executive branch, they have cell phones that are business cell phones, and that is some increases our accessibility. I'm not thrilled about giving my cell phone out to all the constituents out there, and I'd hate to have one where it did happen, but nevertheless, thinking about some of that support, whether it's IT, electronic, or human support, I think it's something that we should think about.
I'm not going to be here much longer, but I'd like to at least see a study in this year's budget to look at that issue of support for legislators.
Yeah, agreed.
That, maybe it's I don't know what it would be. Maybe you need to look at other states or however you want to, however it gets drafted, but I think it's.
I bet we'll find it here nearby, it's easier to transport. We were just talking about the study that we just did with CTE and the analysis we got. I would second Senator Sears' call for something like that. It seems to me we could do it all internally without, just pulling together a working group. Sorry?
I didn't want to interrupt.
Yes.
I know in the legislative compensation bill, there was a study, I didn't know if in there that was part of what they were going to look at, the staffing. Or it's
I
just,
don't remember. I've got it in my office. I can look. Or actually, Jane hasn't come there.
I don't know that you're getting at the issue that I'm trying to.
well, no, I
Your
wondered if
issue
there
is much more.
You're talking about the
concrete.
time and the workload that has
Yeah.
grown
staff
over.
support.
Whether they are or not,
That's what I,
we can add it.
Yeah.
That's
It's-
in the compensation.
Catherine has her hand up.
Oh, yes.
If I might, I believe in that language, there was some discussion about studying staff support.
Oh, okay. good.
So you might want to look at it more carefully and see if it addresses all your, what you're looking for. but
James, can I just?
Sure.
I think our big problem is the expectations of the position have grown tremendously. A number of, and oftentimes we even have congressional offices delegate back to us and refer back
Yeah.
situations to be, and they've got full-time staff.
so,
Yeah, they- this is S39, there's a working group, and among other things it asks how to increase the administrative support available to members to increase their effectiveness and ability to respond efficiently to the needs of their constituents.
To start, but I don't think it really gets to what I think the pressure I feel is that I got people who want to meet with me, for example. If I met with all the people I'm supposed to meet with, I wouldn't be able to be at both committees.
Then we have to basically, I'm getting hit. Everybody wants to meet with me about what's in the budget.
Yes.
And so, when you're looking at 158, different areas of even the one-times, the requests are becoming, and I think we've got to feel more comfortable about saying, we've got your requests, that I just don't, my schedule doesn't permit that kind of, but it's hard because we're so focused on trying to be timely and be responsive.
I think if each committee had one person who was providing support, committee
You can't
members.
really ask
I'm not talking about the committee assistant. That's
well, yeah,
a
but if
different
that,
role. I'm talking about somebody who would assist the chair as well as assist committee members with constituent issues, with issues related to that committee.
Right, research that information.
Well, I want to get back, this is a much larger discussion than the budget here.
Right.
And for Dan's purposes, I want to just come back. I think all of us are feeling crushed by the workload. A lot depends on what your committee is and the scope and the complexity. And I think that makes a big difference. And also, as was pointed out in the Senate, of course, we have bigger districts, we have more constituents, and we serve.
I'd just like to say that Bobby and I served in House. It's way different serving in the Senate than it is serving in the House. And I had a district that had, and I said this to you before, in the healthcare area, I had a health center with a dentist office. Just in the healthcare area, and in the Senate, I have a hospital, I have nursing homes, I have a home health agency, I have a mental health agency, I have 3 health centers. Just in that one area, the level of, we expect to see you, and in the fall, out of the session, everybody wants to see all of us before the session starts. And I'm out 4 or 5 nights a week, which versus when I was in the House, if I was going to a meeting, if the furthest meeting away was 4 miles. Now I'm doing 50 miles every time I go out the door.
I just set up office in Panera, and everybody just comes in,
There you go.
day after day after day.
Well, some people do that, just say, this is what I'm needing.
You're getting to a full-time,
Yeah, this.
I mean, the push is from many people here, I think in buildings, to get to a full-time legislature, and I'll tell you, you look at New York, you look at Massachusetts, they don't do any more work than we do.
Well,
But
your
they
work
get
will take
paid
more
for a
time,
whole
yes.
year and got aides here and aides there.
So,
They don't do any work.
well, they have their offices and they have staff. So of course, the other thing I find, and then we're gonna get back to the budget, and our emails cover the whole gamut.
Okay.
And we don't have a working knowledge to oftentimes to respond, nor could I say, Andrea, please write a response on this particular bill, because oftentimes we don't know what the bill is, or we're not prepared to make a commitment, or we've got to articulate our position on it. And so some of it becomes, hard for staff to carry
I
that
gave up.
body.
I do it.
You gave up.
I have, I've really given up.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Just do an auto reply. That's what a lot of senators and others, or legislators, they have an auto reply. Thank you for your email. Basically, I'll take your comments under advisement. I mean, that's how they're managing this, which is, no response. But I want to get back. We've got about 5 more minutes. Poor Dan is here and he's not going to help us with our workload.
Well, I have worked pretty
It does take
extensively
more
on the other bill that is out there, so I'm sure if you discuss that one.
Which one is that?
The
compensation.
Oh, the compensation. Well, we're gonna be taking that up. And I think we have this, no, everybody wants us to be a citizen legislature, and time limited. But on the other hand, the expectations of what you can do and what you should do are kind of mismatched, and everybody is kind of articulating the pressure that feels. And then we've got the difference in the workload depending on committees and depending on, the House and Senate, which I'm sure would be a very interesting debate, and we will have it at 4:28 in the afternoon. So questions about Dan's presentation?
So all of this is in the budget as it came to us from the House?
Yes.
Except I-
Yes.
With one,
Which is the one?
Yeah, the language is the one piece that wasn't in the House.
To convert the
Yeah, the
position,
proposed
yes,
language,
but,
yeah.
but that's not an additional cost, that's simply moving to permanent classified.
Well, there's a lot of things the House messed up. We're gonna have to fix.
Well, do we get compensated for that, Senator Pierce?
No, nothing extra, but we'll fix it.
Well, unless there are further questions of Dan, I'm going to suggest that we thank him for the presentation. It's certainly very well organized, and I'm going to suggest we call it a day. Hopefully people get home before the rain turns